Good morning. I wanted to welcome you all to Business Ethics Week 4. And I'm going to look over Chapter 4 today, the institutionalization of business ethics. Before we do that today, I want to talk to you about your Week 4 discussion board topic. And this is an intriguing one. I warned you all when we started this class I was going to get you into some areas that could be a little controversial, a little uncomfortable, because that's our world right now. That's where we live almost daily. And so we're going to go some different places, and we're going to go some places that make us squirm a little bit at times. And I don't do that to offend anybody or make anybody feel uncomfortable. It's just, this is kind of the training ground that we all have to understand right now, is their lives and careers that are devastated at times because people don't know fully how to navigate these landscapes. And part of the reasons they don't know how to navigate these landscapes is quite simply because so much of this is just new and emerging. Some of it's been around for a long time, but as societies and cultures, we're just starting to fully come to terms with and deal with some of these issues. I heard a historian at one time that said the Civil War didn't end. It sure didn't end the topics of racial disparity, slavery, any of those type of things. It, much like the Korean War, it was just suspended. And I think many of those same issues and topics will continue to be fought out in the public arena for not only years, but decades to come. And it's intense at times, it's contentious at times, but it's the reality that we're going to be dealing with. So we've got to try to figure out how to walk the lines, navigate the landscape, and we've all got to be able to learn how to reflect and understand how we feel about specific topics and how to position our lives accordingly. So the discussion board topic for this week says, this past year, Governor Ralph Northam was accused of appearing in blackface at a party while in medical school. And there were yearbook photos, which I'm not sure why a medical school is doing yearbooks, but hey, that's another issue at another time. But the question is it appropriate that we could be constrained for our entire professional careers and by immature and questionable acts that we did while younger? Is it appropriate to judge someone on how they behaved in the past in relation to today's sensitivities? For example, #MeToo, racial, sexual identity, and cultural. There's a recent example where John Wayne, the county of Orange County that has an airport named after him, there's pressure on them to rename their airport based on comments that John Wayne made about 50 years ago. And so same thing with equality, treatment of gay rights, things like that. One of the questions is there a line to be drawn? Where should it be? Should you be held and your whole life judged and careers judged and opportunities granted based on things that you did when you were younger? I'm sure that would depend on a continuum for sure, depending on how bad it was. If you murdered someone when you're younger, of course that's going to haunt you. But where should those lines be drawn? Is this debate changed by the fact that much of our lives are now under scrutiny of cameras, public and private? So everything we do, everything we say could be captured on video, could be captured on audio, and come back at some point in our life to maybe kind of bite us when we least expect it. So where and how those lines should be drawn, I don't know that I can sit here and I can tell you I have all the answers, because I don't. But that's part of the debate. That's part of the tug of war that's going on right now that we're all having to deal with. So I've got a about a 2 to 3 minute video that I will have posted on Canvas that deals with the topic. It was an ABC news story on the topic of Ralph Northern at that time, and kind of get you up to speed with everything that we're talking about so that you can speak to this somewhat. So anyway, that's the discussion board for this week. Again, it's kind of a little bit of a dicey one, but I really don't think this class is worth its mettle if we don't explore some of these topics, because these are the types of things that are going to impact our lives and our careers. So let's make sure we're kind of up to speed and understand kind of what the stakes are. So this chapter is called The Institutionalization of Business Ethics. I may include a couple of more videos on there about Enron, maybe even Bernie Madoff, just to kind of give you a little bit of a background on some of the issues that we face today. They're substantial, and again, they're not going away. Learning objectives for this week, and we'll talk about these kind of individually somewhat. Distinguish between the voluntary and mandated boundaries of ethical conduct. And again, this is what we're struggling with, is where are these lines? Let's take the example of Ralph Northern, the governor of Virginia. The yearbook photo that he was either in or not in, he kind of flip-flops back and forth whether he was in it or not. He's said both ways, but let's assume he's in it. That photo doesn't legally preclude him from being governor of the state of Virginia. Even if he admits he was in it, there's really, I don't think, anything legal that would mandate that he could not serve as governor from that point forward, or even run again. But there can be social pressures, and there can be tremendous social pressures to bear on whether he should voluntarily give up the office of governor. And there were severe social pressures and cultural pressures on him at that time. If I remember correctly, I don't think he gave up the governor's office. I think he's still governor of Virginia. I think his popularity has recovered at least somewhat since that scandal, and he seems to have survived it. Now, would that be different whether he was a Democrat, whether he was a Republican? I think he had a pretty long track record and a pretty positive track record on civil rights issues. That may have helped his case. And so there could be several things that would come into play as to whether you could survive such a scandal or not. Provide the next learning objective, provide specific mandated requirements for legal compliance in specific subject matter areas related to competition, consumers, and safety. We'll talk about a couple of these, Sarbanes-Oxley and the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act. And so there are a lot of folks out there, and they tend to be on the left side of the spectrum, that think government's the answer and that we need to regulate behavior. We need to regulate actions and behaviors. There are other folks who tend to be on the right side of the spectrum that think that we don't need all the regulations and that common sense should kind of dictate. Well, I think a lot of us would have to agree that common sense didn't dictate for the longest time and still doesn't seem to at current time. So there's a lot of tug towards the left side of the spectrum that we need to regulate behaviors more, and we need to regulate opportunities more. And having the laws in place, which I think many of those have been overturned right now, that gave minorities an advantage when being accepted to universities, is one form of that, or one example of that. There are many others that in housing and lending and many other things that have kind of come into place. So do they need to be there? Yeah, I do. I think left to our own devices, I think we're going to keep the status quo, and I think the status quo does discriminate not only based on race, but also a lot of other factors, whether it be education, whether it be maybe the parts of the country you're from. There's several different ways that discrimination can manifest. So I do think that having regulations and laws that help even the playing field somewhat, probably not all bad. Economic opportunity is another form of discrimination, whether you have the money to do certain things or not. So anyway, I do think there needs to be compliance, legal compliance qualifications. I do need to think there needs to be some regulation, things like that. The constant tug of war is, where are those lines? Where do you draw those lines? It's quite a tug of war back and forth where those lines should be. I'm going to jump ahead to, here's some laws regulating competition. These are in your PowerPoints, just a number of them and when they were formulated. Here's laws protecting consumers that are out there, and U.S. laws promoting equity and safety. So you can see through the course of our history, we've had several of those. I will tell you, when Republican administrations are in power, regulation tends to slow down, and even some regulations tend to go away. As I said, I think the laws that kind of benefited minorities in terms of university admittance, some of those have either been done away with or defanged, if you will, or diminished in many ways, but some of them obviously are still out there. So one act that I'd highlight is Sarbanes-Oxley. This was passed to establish a system of federal oversight on corporate accounting practices. And one of the, a couple of videos I will attach to the supplemental video section of Canvas, and also probably with my announcement. One is on Enron, and one is on Bernie Madoff. And Enron in particular spurred a lot of regulation in terms of how businesses can operate, how accounting firms can operate. One of the things that got very insidious and very too tight for oversight and control purposes is accounting firms got too in bed with the firms that they were supposed to audit and keep on the right track. They had consulting firms that they were able to market to the firms that they audited. And so if a firm was purchasing, like Enron, for example, was purchasing enough of their consulting services, it put pressure on them to turn their back on certain accounting irregularities and even outright fraud to protect those relationships. Sarbanes-Oxley divorced those relationships, at least in the US. I think there's still parts of the world where that can go on, but in the US, they have done away with that to where it makes it illegal for an accounting firm to have consulting and their accounting auditing in the same organization. The Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act and Consumer Protection Act, this was after 2008 financial crisis, and it created new financial agencies, Office of Financial Research, Financial Stability Oversight Council, which really regulates the banks and makes sure that they have enough net worth and enough strength to keep themselves out of trouble if we had another 2008. So they have stress tests, they have any number of things that kind of control the banks. And then one big bureau was the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This was a darling of the Democratic Party and created under Barack Obama. On the heels of all of this, the Trump administration, when the Republicans took office, the bureau is still there, but it's been basically defanged and defunded. So it really doesn't have the budgets or the personnel to really do much with it anymore. And I think even though that bureau may stay in effect, it will probably go back and forth whether it has any strength or any power based on which administration or which party is in power. So Dodd-Frank was brought about by whistleblower. And so there's a whistleblower bounty. programs that are in effect with all of this as well. So anyway, let's see if there's anything else. The thing that I would add in conclusion on this is that we have a obligation to try to do business ethically and fairly, and it's something that we always struggle with, even defining the term what is ethical and what is fair. If you asked 1,000 people to plot the point on the line what's fair and what's ethical, you'd have 1,000 different plots. Everybody sees it differently, and you see it much differently depending on your background, where you come from, those type of things. So it is going to be something we'll continue to battle with. I don't think there's going to be easy answers, and there's going to be a lot of division and dissension in terms of what we think is fair, right, and just. And so that's why business ethics, that's why ethics classes in general are so very important, is that we have an opportunity in a setting like this to think about these things when we're not necessarily faced with a crisis at our doorstep. When we don't have duress and we don't have the pressure of a decision, it's easier for us to kind of think about what we believe. That's why I encouraged everybody to do a mission statement, and I encourage you to do one now while you have somewhat kind of the cover of being in an academic setting, and maybe you don't have quite the wolves at the door, if you will, and the pressures to bear that would impede you from making logical and good decisions. So anyway, I hope you found this helpful for this week. I will be putting some supplemental content on Canvas, so that will be with this post, a few more videos, and I'll also put them in the supplemental videos section and Canvas as well. All right, well, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Stay safe. So far, good news, and we're doing pretty good so far on the Newman University front, the last I've heard. Very few cases. Any cases they've had, we're getting people quarantined quickly. And so I think, knock on wood, so far so good. And we'll hope we continue on that right track. So be safe and make good decisions. All right, well, thank you all. We'll talk to you next week.